Hey, Soul Stories fam. We've got a swoon-worthy love story for you today. Let's jump in and tell us, what city are you watching from? Lakewood Lake lay still, like a blue mirror stretching under the morning sun. Rows of fiery red maples reflected on the water, glittering like fragments of stained glass. By the edge of the lake stood the Hartman family's luxurious resort, towering like a modern castle, with rows of glass houses filled with imported flowers and winding stone paths. Daniel Ross, a 10-year-old boy, sat cross-legged on the wooden steps near the water, his hands still smudged with soil. His father was the resort's head gardener, and since childhood, Daniel had grown up with the smell of freshly cut grass and the rustling of leaves in the wind. He had a special love for the wildflowers that grew around the lake, flowers with no names, tended by no one, yet blooming so brightly. "Daniel!" A clear, ringing voice called out. He looked up. Isabella Hartman, the little heiress of the resort, was running toward him. Her white dress fluttered, her small shoes muddied from stepping across dew-soaked grass. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Daniel frowned, worrying like a little old man. Isabella pouted, her eyes sparkling like drops of the lake. "I want to see what you're doing." "Mom says rich girls must keep their hands clean, but I'm so bored. I want to learn to plant flowers with you." Daniel scratched his head, embarrassed. "But your dress will get dirty." "So what?" Isabella laughed, dimples showing on her cheeks. "Mom has plenty of other dresses. But this flower, if I plant it with my own hands, it'll be one of a kind." That innocent remark made Daniel's heart tremble. He handed Isabella a tiny seedling and explained, "You have to dig just a small hole, gently place the roots down, then cover them with soil. Don't forget to water it or the plant will be thirsty." Isabella followed his instructions, her little hands trembling but full of determination. When the wildflower finally stood upright in the soil, she clapped her hands and cheered. "I did it! From now on, it's my flower." Daniel smiled. He had never seen eyes shine that brightly. From that day on, Lakewood Lake gained two little companions who spent their days with soil and water. Daniel taught Isabella how to recognize leaves, how to tell seeds apart. In return, Isabella told Daniel the fairy tales her mother read to her every night. They had a shared secret, a small corner behind the glass house, where the two of them planted wildflowers, set paper boats afloat, and wrote wishes on pebbles before tossing them into the lake. Isabella called it our garden. One time, Isabella asked very seriously, "Daniel, when you grow up, will you still be here?" Daniel hesitated. His parents argued constantly. Their little house always felt heavy. He knew one day he might have to leave Lakewood. But faced with those clear, trusting eyes, he pressed his lips together and nodded. "I'll come back. I promise." Isabella held out her pinky finger. The two children hooked their fingers together, a silent vow neither of them knew would matter so much. When Daniel was 12, a storm struck his family. His parents divorced. His mother took him to a small seaside town, hundreds of miles from Lakewood. On the day they left, Daniel ran to the lake one last time. Isabella was there, her white dress soaked by the rain, clutching a little notebook in her arms. She shouted through the roaring wind, "You have to come back! I'll wait for you!" Daniel couldn't hold back and cried out in return, "I promise." That was the last look they shared, blurred by rain and tears. Time drifted by like the wind over the lake. Daniel grew up by the sea, getting used to waves and sand. But every time he closed his eyes, he still heard the laughter of the girl in the white dress. Whenever he saw a wildflower sprouting in the dry sand, he thought of their secret garden by Lakewood. In his heart, the promise of that long-ago day remained intact, like a seed waiting to bloom. 13 years had passed since the day Daniel left Lakewood. Long enough for a skinny boy to become a grown man, but also long enough for childhood memories to turn into distant dreams. Life by the sea had never been easy. His mother worked twice as hard to support him and pay off debts. Daniel learned carpentry and repair work, and then took on any jobs that could help him provide for his family. But on a gloomy afternoon when the phone rang, his entire world collapsed. His father, the one who had stayed in Lakewood after the divorce, had suffered a work accident and could no longer tend gardens. The medical bills were overwhelming, while his mother was drowning in debt. Daniel understood he had no other choice. He had to return. The train stopped at Lakewood Station on an autumn morning. Daniel stepped down, carrying an old suitcase and calloused hands. Lakewood's air was the same, a thin mist hovering over the lake, red maples glowing as if whispering secrets to the wind. But inside him, everything felt both familiar and strangely distant. The Hartman Resort rose before his eyes, bigger and more luxurious than ever, with new glass houses, modern pools, and lavish restaurants. Yet something about it unsettled him. The once vibrant gardens now looked rigid, lifeless. The stone walkways gleamed, the flowers were trimmed into perfect squares. But there was no trace of wildness, no innocence left. He drew a deep breath and stepped through the main gate. A receptionist looked him up and down with suspicion until Daniel explained, "I'm Mr. Ross's son, the man who used to care for these gardens. I'd like to apply for work." Within a few days, thanks to his father's introduction, Daniel was hired as a maintenance worker and was entrusted with part of the old garden. Hard labor never frightened him. In fact, touching the soil and listening to leaves rustle gave him a peace he hadn't felt in years, as if he had returned to the place he truly belonged. One afternoon, while repairing the old flower trellis by the lake, Daniel heard a faint cough near the glass house. He looked up. A slender figure appeared on the stone path, golden hair falling over her shoulders, a pale face still carrying a fragile kind of beauty. Isabella. Daniel's heart stumbled. The little girl in the white dress had become a young woman, but her eyes, they were still the same clear eyes he had carried in his memory all these years, only now shadowed by something sorrowful. "Daniel?" Her voice trembled, as if she could hardly believe it. He dropped his tools and rose to his feet. In that instant, the long years of distance dissolved. He felt like the boy he once was, except now he was grown, and she was fragile, like a flower struggling to withstand the wind. "It's me," Daniel answered softly, his voice thick. "I came back." Isabella smiled, her smile laced with tears. "I still remembered your promise, though sometimes I thought maybe you had forgotten." Daniel didn't answer right away. He only stepped closer to see her face more clearly. Her skin was pale, her lips faint in color, and she wore a thin scarf around her shoulders, though the air wasn't cold. Just one glance was enough for him to understand. Isabella was ill. They sat together on the wooden bench by the lake. The afternoon air was quiet, broken only by the gentle sound of water lapping at the shore. Isabella told him that after her mother's death, she had mostly stayed indoors, rarely leaving her room because of a rare autoimmune disease. Her frail body couldn't tolerate the sun or wind, and the adventures of her youth had been confined within the walls of the resort. "I miss the old garden so much," Isabella said, her eyes gazing into the distance, "but now it feels so different, as if it lost its soul." Daniel lowered his head, letting his hand rest on the soil beside him. He felt it too. The garden looked grand but lacked love. A powerful desire rose inside him, to bring back the soul of this place, the breeze, the colors, the innocent laughter he and Isabella had once shared. That encounter left a stirring that Daniel couldn't shake. He realized that no matter how much time had passed, no matter how turbulent life had been, some bonds could never break. Isabella was that bond. That night back in his small staff quarters, Daniel opened the window to the lake. Silver moonlight spread across the water, reflecting in every ripple. He whispered to himself, "I've really come back, and this time I won't lose her again." Victor Hartman's office looked straight out onto Lakewood. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows let the afternoon light spill across the water in golden streaks. Inside, everything was neatly arranged. Dark wood bookshelves, an antique wall clock, and a framed photo of Isabella as a child. White dress, braided hair, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Daniel stood before the desk, the scent of soil still clinging to his hands. He had just finished repairing the irrigation system in the glass house. Victor gestured toward a chair, but Daniel hesitated, settling awkwardly on the edge. On the desk, a teapot still steamed, though Victor poured only for himself. His eyes lingered for a long moment on the photo of his daughter. "You still remember her as a child, don't you?" Victor began, his voice low and weary. "She called the garden behind the glass house her secret kingdom. Every day she begged to go there." Daniel nodded lightly. "I remember." He couldn't bring himself to stare at the photo. His mind already summoned the image of the little girl in a white dress, running across dew-soaked grass, her shoes muddy yet her smile radiant. Victor folded his arms, his gaze hardening. Isabella dreamed of a fairy tale wedding ever since she was small. Nothing extravagant, just flowers, lights, and the lake. But now, he faltered, eyes fixed on the distant water. You've seen her. Her health is failing. The doctors won't promise us time. His throat worked as he swallowed, showing rare vulnerability. I don't want my daughter to leave this world with her simplest dream still unfulfilled. Daniel clasped his hands tightly. He guessed what was coming, but he wasn't ready. Victor spoke slowly, as if weighing every word. I've watched since the day you returned. When you're near, she smiles. Smiles like she did as a child. The glass house hasn't been so full of light in years. He looked directly at Daniel. I have a proposal. If you marry my daughter, in return, your family will be safe from poverty. I'll pay off your mother's debts, cover your father's medical bills, and guarantee you steady work, here or anywhere you choose in the future. The room grew so quiet that Daniel could hear the ticking clock. The words landed like a stone dropped into the lake. Not loud, but sending ripples far and wide. Marriage, Daniel drew a deep breath, should be about love. I'm not asking you to say things you don't yet feel, Victor replied firmly. I'm only asking you to give her a true home. A month, a year, however long fate allows. You may refuse, but think of her smile, and think of your mother, his voice deepened. I am a father, and you are a son. The last words weighed heavily. In Daniel's mind, images flashed. His mother bent over the table, calculating debts, shoulders trembling each time the phone rang with demands for payment. His father lying immobile, the once strong arm now frail, the damp rental room near the hospital, dinners of bread and watery soup. He had worked every odd job he could, but the debts only multiplied. And then came another image. Lakewood's secret garden, paper boats, the pinky swear promise, Isabella's voice yesterday, gentle as the lake's tide. I still remembered your promise, though sometimes I thought maybe you had forgotten. I have one question, Daniel finally said. Does Isabella know about this? I mean, does she have the right to choose? Victor was silent for a moment, then nodded. She knows her illness better than anyone. She knows her old dreams too. I haven't told her about this proposal because I don't want her to feel like a burden, but I will never force her. If you agree, you two will talk openly. She may refuse. I only open the door. The choice to step through will be hers. A knot in Daniel's chest loosened. I agree that she mustn't be deceived. Victor nodded. No lies. I don't want that either. He drew a long breath, his voice rougher now. All I want is joy for her. A small wedding in the glass house by the lake. You'll tend the garden, I'll handle the rest. No strange contracts, you'll have only my word. Daniel was quiet for a long time. In that stillness, he saw his 12-year-old self again, shouting his promise through the rain, Isabella in her drenched white dress, clutching a notebook. He also saw his mother yesterday, holding a hospital bill and pretending to gaze at the rain to hide her red eyes. If I agree, Daniel said slowly, I have 3 conditions. Victor gestured for him to go on. First, everything must be told clearly to Isabella. She decides. If she says yes, then we'll get married. But the wedding will be hers, not a performance for resort guests. Second, I want to restore the glasshouse garden as she once loved it, with wildflowers, the smell of damp soil, a place to sit and watch the lake. Not perfect, but alive. Third, I will not take money for myself. You may pay my mother's debts and cover my father's care. For that I am grateful. But nothing else should be in my name. I won't look at my wallet one day and feel that love was priced. Victor studied him for a long moment. The sharp gaze of a businessman softened, as if something had collapsed only to rebuild stronger. He stood, came around the desk, and extended his hand. Agreed. All 3 conditions. Victor's hand was warm and firm. Daniel gripped it, feeling as though he had crossed an invisible threshold. Behind him, the storm of poverty. Ahead, an uncertain road. but at least leading toward the glow of the glass house where one girl waited for his smile. Daniel, Victor said, eyes drifting back to the lake, I am not a perfect man. I spent my life building, sometimes forgetting that what holds us steady is not stone walls, but small blossoms. Thank you for reminding me. Daniel gave a small nod. Words were never his strength. He only looked toward the lake, now tinted with sunset, and made himself a quiet promise. If Isabella agreed, he would spend every day making her dreams real, gently, patiently, like a seed pushing through after a long winter. Leaving the office, Daniel took the shortcut down to the glass house. Twilight had fallen, and the first lights glowed like fireflies overhead. He touched the doorframe, breathing in the scent of damp earth and young leaves. In the far corner, a few thin vines clung to the old trellis. He would replace the supports, enrich the soil, scatter white pebbles, and place a wooden bench facing the lake. He would plant clusters of wild daisies, her favorite, and a patch of white roses, so each morning Isabella could see her dream begin to bloom. A soft cough came from the path. Daniel turned. Isabella stood there, wrapped in a thin shawl. The light touched her pale face, but her eyes shone like the lake at night. You just met my father, she asked. Daniel nodded. I did. And, Isabella, there's something I want to tell you directly. No secrets, no circling around. She stepped closer under the warm lights. I'm listening. Daniel looked into her eyes, speaking each word clearly, though softly. Your father wants us to marry. Not for money, for your dream, and because I want to be with you, to care for you, like before, but with more. Only if you say yes. Isabella didn't answer right away. She turned toward the glass house where a few wildflowers had just opened, then up to the string of lights like a pocket of stars. After a long pause, she closed her eyes, chest rising with labored breaths. When she opened them again, her lashes were wet. I don't know what to say, she whispered, but I'm grateful that you asked me first. Daniel nodded. Tomorrow we'll talk more. Tonight I just want you to know, every choice is yours. Isabella smiled, the same smile that once warmed all of Lakewood when they were children. Tomorrow evening, here under these lights, I want to see the flowers with you. Yes, Daniel answered. And inside him, another door opened, not to an arrangement, but to hope. By morning, Victor brought a pot of ginger tea to the wooden table, waiting until Isabella was steady before sitting across from her. He didn't speak like the commanding resort owner he was, but as a father, slow and careful. I need to talk about something difficult, he began. If you feel tired, we'll stop. Isabella nodded, her hands wrapped around the warm porcelain. Her color looked a little better than yesterday. Her eyes remained clear. The doctors can't promise anything, Victor said. I spoke with Daniel about your old dream, a small wedding in the glass house. But the choice is yours. He paused, measuring each word. If you agree, I'll handle the heavy parts so you won't strain. A short ceremony, few guests, ramps instead of stairs. If you don't want it, we end it here. I'll still be your father, no conditions. Isabella looked straight at him. Do you want me to say yes? Victor didn't answer at once. He stared at the lake, which was changing colors, then turned back. I want you to be at peace. If one meaningful day helps you feel life is worth more, then I'll support it. If not, we'll choose another path. I've spent years managing everything like a project. Today, I'm learning to be a father properly. The wind brushed the roof. Isabella set her cup down. I want to decide clearly, not out of fear of time, she said. I need to know Daniel truly stands beside me, not because of a deal. That was his first condition, Victor replied. He said, only if you agree. And he refused to take money, aside from the help I gave his parents. He wants love to remain without a price tag. Isabella's lips trembled, not from weakness, but like a crack where ice begins to melt. She remembered Daniel checking doorsteps quietly each morning, reading aloud until she drifted to sleep, never pushing when her breath gave out. That calm pride steadied her more than any promise could. I have conditions, she said. A simple dress, a short ceremony, comfortable chairs in the glass house with a place to lean back, no noisy cameras, and You'll come early. Sit in the front row as a father, not as the organizer. Victor nodded. Everything as you wish. Isabella leaned back, eyes closing briefly. The lake seemed to pause. I agree, she said, voice steady. Not to chase an unfinished fairy tale, but to mark whatever days remain with something gentle and real. In the place I grew up, among living things. Daniel understands that. And I want you there, silent as today. Victor couldn't hide his long breath. He reached out, then stopped, afraid to press too firmly. Isabella placed her hand over his. His hand was warm and trembling. Thank you, he whispered. I'll let the wind pass this time. I won't block it anymore. Isabella smiled. Just be my father. They sat longer, speaking little. When the tea cooled, Victor rose and cleared the cups. I'll tell Marta to prepare the ramps. You rest a while. Isabella nodded, watching him disappear through the door. The lake outside darkened. She closed her eyes, letting her breath even out. Her decision didn't lift her burden. It steadied her. No fireworks, no grand vows. Just a day shaped to her strength, with a man willing to walk slowly beside her and a father learning to sit quietly in the front row. When she opened her eyes, the glass house lights flickered on one by one. Somewhere Daniel was likely testing the handrails. The thought was enough to make her smile. A small, lasting smile. Autumn fell gently over Lakewood. The maples along the shore had turned a deep crimson, their leaves trembling in the breeze, sending soft ripples across the lake as though someone had touched the surface with a fingertip. The glass house by the water glowed with little golden bulbs, strung low like obedient fireflies. From afar, the sound of a violin rehearsal floated in, a quiet melody that made the air as tender as a whisper. Today was the wedding day. There was no grand floral gate, no red carpet, no flashing cameras. Just a small ceremony, exactly as agreed between Daniel and Mr. Victor for the bride alone, for Isabella's childhood dream. The guest list could be counted on one hand: Victor, old housekeeper Marta, the cook, a young receptionist, the town's pastor, and the elderly couple who lived beside the resort. The people who had watched Isabella grow up. Daniel stood beneath the vine-covered arch he had repaired himself. A white shirt, a pale blue tie, a simple gray jacket. On his chest pocket, a sprig of wild daisy, the same flower the little girl in the white dress had once planted with her small trembling hands. His hands were rough with calluses, but when he smoothed the hem of his shirt, the motion was careful, almost reverent. Victor came forward, laying a hand on Daniel's shoulder. The grip wasn't tight, but it carried what words couldn't. A thank you, a plea, and the trembling of a father afraid of losing the last gift he could give his daughter. Thank you, he said quietly. Daniel nodded. I'll make everything soft, like the earth after rain, so Isabella won't grow weary. The violin fell silent. The glass house doors opened. Isabella appeared, walking slowly beside Marta. She wore a simple white dress, soft fabric, sleeves falling lightly over her wrists, a thin shawl to shield her fragile skin from the breeze. Her blonde hair was tied neatly, a loose strand falling by her ear. In her hands was a bouquet of white roses threaded with lavender, its scent faint and calming. She looked like a princess stepped out of an old storybook, but a fragile one, walking slowly, breath short, eyes shimmering with emotion. When she lifted her gaze, Daniel's heart pounded like the waves at the lake's edge, steady, close, yet rising all the same. The bride drew nearer, step by step. Each one seemed to carry the fragrance of the glass house soil, the roses, the aged wooden benches. Daniel's mind filled with memories. The little girl in a white dress, paper boats, pebbles carved with words, the pinky promise. Now it all returned, standing beside him, smiling, saying, "Here, this dream is mine." The pastor cleared his throat gently, smiling. Shall we begin? The ceremony was short, no long speeches, just the traditional questions, a few sincere blessings. When asked, Daniel's "I do" was soft but steady, like a wooden nail driven into a boat, holding it firm against the waves. When Isabella was asked, she looked at him a moment longer, as if to imprint his face forever, then said, "I do." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. The wedding rings were two simple silver bands made by a local craftsman. Daniel slid the ring onto her slender, cool fingers. Isabella slipped his ring on too, pausing a moment as her fingertip brushed his calluses, her silent thank you to the hands that had kept the garden soul alive. "Would you like to say something to the bride?" the pastor asked. Daniel looked at Isabella. He hadn't prepared anything grand, only the words he had carried silently for more than 10 years. "I'm not good at making big promises," he said, "but I know how to water each morning, when to shield from the sun, when to prune the dry branches so the tree can breathe. If you'll have me, I'll tend this marriage the way I tended our secret garden. Little by little, patiently, gently." Isabella bit her lip, nodded. "That's what I want." The pastor blessed them. Applause followed, small but warm. Victor dabbed at his eyes. Marta's smile carved deep lines in her face, like furrows in a field after harvest. A thin breeze drifted through the glass house, lifting the white ribbons on Isabella's sleeve like strips of sunlight. Their kiss was not long, just the gentlest touch of lips, enough to feel each other's warmth. Then they parted, hand in hand. "Sit and rest a while," Daniel murmured. She nodded. The reception unfolded right there on the glass house floor. A few round tables, steaming cups of tea, the sweet smell of apple pie baked that morning by the cook. Isabella drank half a cup, then leaned back, resting. Daniel never stopped watching, noting each sigh, each time she reached for her shawl. No rush, no loud music, no forced cheer, only peace. As the sun slid lower behind the forest of maples, Daniel stood. "I have a gift for you," Isabella smiled. "Another one. I've received too much already." "This one," Daniel said, "is something only will understand." He led her down a narrow path, past rows of new plants, behind a curtain of leaves. A small hidden space opened, and Isabella stopped short. It was a secret garden within the glass house. Daniel had built a low wooden trellis for young vines to climb. Beneath it, a bench faced the lake, still carrying the scent of fresh wood. Around it, clusters of daisies, lavender, and white roses just beginning to bloom. In the corner, a little fountain trickled into a stone basin, its soft sound steadying the heart. On the wooden wall, a shelf held folded paper boats and a carved box with fine letters, "Our Garden." "You remembered." Isabella touched the carving, her voice fine as thread. "I remembered," Daniel answered, "and I thought, when you're tired, we can come here. The sun will be softer, the wind gentler. Here there's damp earth, the sound of water, a place to sit and listen to what the heart says." Isabella sat on the bench, bouquet resting on her lap, her head leaning on Daniel's shoulder. For a long while she said nothing, only breathed slowly, as if measuring out a new kind of peace. Her hand found his, weaving their fingers together. "I don't know if the future will be long or short," she said at last, "but today I feel alive." "So do I," Daniel replied. "From now on, each day will plant a seed. Nothing grand, just enough that it grows." She laughed softly. "Then what's the first seed?" "Giving this place a name." "I thought you already did. Our garden." "Yes," Daniel teased, "but you're the gardener. You need to sign it too." Isabella pulled a slim notebook from her pocket, different from the childhood diary, its cover printed with tiny leaves. On the first page she wrote slowly, "Wedding Day. First seed, peace." Then she drew a daisy, thin petals neatly spread. Outside, the lake reflected the last of the sunset. The glass house lights glowed warmer, golden as a cupped hand shielding a candle. From a distance, Victor watched, then turned away, leaving the young couple their sky. Night arrived quietly. Daniel pulled a thin blanket over Isabella's shoulders, careful as one might cover a treasured painting. She leaned closer, eyes shining, no longer weary as before. He knew that tomorrow and the days after, there would be hardships, winds stronger than this. But for now, everything was gathered into the trickle of water, the scent of roses, and the warmth at his shoulder. "Good evening, my wife," Daniel whispered. Isabella answered with a small smile. "Good evening, keeper of the lake's secret." In the glass house by Lakewood, the newly named secret garden began to breathe. Slow, deep, steady, like a love born of an arrangement, now becoming real. and outside the autumn wind passed through the forest of maples, softly accepting its place among the blessings. The night after the wedding, Lakewood was still as a mirror. The glass house door was left slightly ajar, letting the autumn breeze slip in with the scent of damp leaves and the steady trickle of water from the stone fountain. Daniel hung a few more lanterns beneath the trellis, small golden lights glowing gently, like cupped hands shielding a candle flame from going out. Isabella arrived slowly, carrying an old cloth-bound notebook. Its corners were frayed, and on one edge was a tiny paper flower, handmade from scraps of colored paper. On the cover, in a child's handwriting, were the words "Garden by the Lake." "What are you holding?" Daniel asked, sliding the bench closer so she could sit. "A journal?" Isabella smiled softly. "I started it the summer I turned 6. Marta kept it in an old cabinet. Tonight, I want you to have it." She placed the notebook in his hands as carefully as if she were giving him something fragile. When he opened it, the smell of old paper rose, mixed with the faint fragrance of dried flowers pressed between its pages. White daisies, morning glories, a sprig of lavender as thin as a purple thread. The first pages were filled with uneven letters and drawings. One showed a messy-haired boy folding paper boats. Another, Lakewood Lake, dotted with round shapes for fish. Another page had nothing but exclamation marks. "It rained too hard today. Couldn't go to the garden." Daniel smiled when he came across a line, underlined in childish scrawl. "Today I planted a seedling." Daniel said water must be poured gently, like speaking softly. "I think plants like to be whispered to." Isabella's eyes glistened. "Back then, I wrote everything down, afraid I'd forget when I grew older. But some things don't need to be written. They never leave you." Daniel turned a few more pages. One was decorated with colored paper petals, glued into a slightly crooked shape, resembling a flower. Underneath, written in faded blue ink, were the words, "When I grow up, I want to marry Daniel." Daniel froze. He read it again and again, as if afraid to misunderstand. His heart skipped a beat, then settled into a slow, steady rhythm, warm and deep, like oars dipping quietly into the lake at night. He looked up and met Isabella's gaze. She didn't look away, just smiled faintly, her cheeks tinged pink as if touched by soft sunlight. "I really wrote that." Mama laughed and said, "My silly little girl is far too young." But when I wrote it, it felt like planting a seed. I didn't know if it would sprout, but I wanted to put it into the soil. Daniel closed the journal, pressing it lightly to his chest as if to calm his racing heart. "Thank you for never pulling that seed out." They sat in silence, listening to the water drip into the stone basin, the lanterns brushing against each other in the breeze. A small gecko crept across the shelf where paper boats were lined. "And you," Isabella asked, her voice like a wisp of smoke, "were the years by the sea very hard?" Daniel looked out at the lake. From afar, the town's lights stretched across the water in a long reflection. "Yes, but not only hard. The sea taught me things. That every morning brings wind, no matter how still or stormy the night before. That a small boat won't capsize if you lighten its load, and that you can't shout at the waves to stop. You can only learn to row with their rhythm." He told her about working as a carpenter's helper, repairing rooftops, and standing night watch at the docks in winter. His stories carried no complaints, only simple meals, partial debt payments, and nights when he missed the smell of Lakewood's damp earth so much it hurt. Isabella listened, her eyes brimming. "And me," she said, "I had a little world in my room. I gave names to every potted plant. I sketched the lake from my window. I reread old pages of this journal and thought, if Daniel ever comes back, I'll tell him everything. Even the times I was afraid I'd forget his voice." Daniel turned back to her, eyes steady. "I'm here now." She nodded, smiling through tears. "You're here now." The lanterns swayed. Daniel placed the journal into the carved box marked "Our Garden" beside the paper boats. "It'll be safe here," he said, "close to the things we planted." Isabella hesitated, then pointed at a patch of fresh soil he had tilled. "Shall we plant a few seeds tonight? So the wedding seed of peace will have friends?" Daniel filled a little watering can, nodding. Together they scattered white daisy seeds into the loose soil, covered them with a thin layer, and watered softly, as if whispering. Then Isabella pulled a white ribbon from her pocket, tying it to a small wooden stake beside the bed. On it, she wrote in ink, "Second seed, patience." "Because flowers need time," she explained, "and so does love." Daniel nodded. "I'll water them every morning." They sat close on the bench. The fragrance of lavender mingled with the scent of damp soil. Clean, gentle. Under the lanterns, Isabella no longer looked as pale as she did by day. The nightlight, the soft glow of the bulbs, deepened her eyes, warming her golden hair. "Daniel," she said, "I used to fear our marriage would just be an arrangement, a shelter from the wind. But tonight, seeing you hold this journal," she touched the cover, "I know I'm not walking alone." He smiled. "I feel the same. I don't know how to say love like in books, but I know when to put my hands in the soil, how to check if a pot has enough water, and how to patch a roof so it won't leak in the rain. And," he paused, speaking slowly, "I want to learn to say love the way you do, if you'll teach me." Isabella laughed softly, like the clink of glasses. "I'll teach you." Starting with something very small. She breathed in the wildflower scent, then lifted her face. Their first kiss beneath the lanterns. Not rushed, not showy, just lips meeting like two leaves brushing in the breeze. Daniel inhaled lavender from her hair, the musty sweetness of the old journal, the freshness of watered soil, and a hint of honey in the glasshouse air. His heartbeat was steady, not a drum of battle, but the rhythm of someone finally home. They parted laughing, shy as two children testing whether a paper boat would float. "This one will float," Isabella said, reading his thoughts, "because we set it on the water together." Daniel held her hand. Her skin was soft but cool. He rubbed gently to warm it. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll build another trellis for climbing flowers. You can hang drawings on it, and if you're tired, we'll just sit and watch the water." She nodded. "And the day after, I'll read you more from the journal. Some entries are silly, but I want you to know everything. The fears, the strength." "I want to hear it all," Daniel said, "because it's all you." Outside, a faint breeze rippled Lakewood, carrying the dip of an oar across the night water. In the glass house, they sat together among freshly watered pots, lantern light, and wildflowers learning to open in the dark. Their marriage had begun as an arrangement. That much was true. But between papers and unspoken contracts, there had also been clumsy paper flowers, petals pressed flat through the years, and a crooked childish line. "When I grow up, I want to marry Daniel." Now, under lantern light and the scent of wildflowers, that line was no longer a childish wish. It was a small path stretching forward, where each morning Daniel would water, each afternoon Isabella would tie another ribbon, and each evening they would learn to say love in simple ways. A warm bowl of soup, a scarf over tired shoulders, a handful of daisy seeds scattered. Before leaving the glass house, Isabella laid her hand on the wooden box, pausing. "Let me keep the journal here, beside the paper boats." "Yes," Daniel said. "So whenever we need, we can open it, to remember how far we've come." They dimmed the lanterns, leaving just a few glowing low. Enough light to see the path, enough to know someone was walking steadily beside you. Outside, the lake darkened, though the shoreline remained clear. Somewhere, a fish broke the surface, ripples spreading before fading into stillness. The night closed like a journal page, and on the next page, there would be another paper flower, cut and pasted by their own hands, with time, patience, and the warmth of two hearts. Morning rose slowly over Lakewood. Dew still clung to the wooden railings. Daniel set the table on the deck, oatmeal, a few slices of apple, and a pot of ginger tea. The pillbox sat beside the small clock, a reminder for the morning dose. Isabella, wrapped in a thin cardigan, sat down and breathed in the scent of damp wood after a night of rain. "I slept a few hours straight last night," she said. "That's good." "Let's keep this rhythm for a few more days," Daniel replied, placing the glass of water by the pillbox. He didn't push her, just waited while she opened the lid herself, swallowed each pill, and followed with a sip of warm water. They were used to these small, steady routines, the quiet details that kept each day standing firm. After breakfast, she leaned back, holding her cup of tea. "What's on your schedule in the garden?" check the irrigation system, replace the soil in the west row of pots, and approve the new ramp for the glass house. A ramp for the wheelchair on days when you need it, so you don't always have to deal with the steps. She nodded, a small smile, the wordless acknowledgement that he always thought ahead of things she hadn't spoken yet. At noon, the glass house became their quiet refuge. They read together from the same book, each holding one edge of the cover. When she grew tired, Isabella closed her eyes and listened to Daniel read in his even, steady voice. Between the pauses, only the sound of water dripping from the irrigation tube into the stone basin could be heard. On better days, she painted, not with bright colors like in storybooks, but with a smaller palette. Gray of water, dull green of leaves seen through glass, faded yellow of wood. Daniel hung her sketches on the trellis he had built, not critiquing, just raising them slightly higher so they matched her eye level when she sat. In the afternoons, Daniel went into the garden with two young workers to replace soil, moving wild plants into open spaces where the wind flowed. He imposed no strict form, only preserved the natural order, letting the breeze pass through, letting sunlight fall onto the ground. Within a week, the paths felt softer, the scent of damp earth stronger, and visitors instinctively slowed their steps. If strong enough, Isabella came to the doorway to observe. That lavender bush should be moved closer to the sun, she would say. Not a command, but the suggestion of someone who lived in the space all day and felt its breathing rhythm. Daniel followed, and that evening, the fragrance of lavender filled the lobby more clearly. On gentle sunny days, they circled the lake. Daniel carried a light folding chair, a bottle of water, and a thin scarf. They walked slowly, paced by her breath. When Isabella signaled, he unfolded the chair and she sat, gazing at the water. Today I managed 15 minutes of sun, she said. Not proudly, not sadly, just noting. Tomorrow we'll see again. You don't need to be more than others. Only a little more than yesterday, Daniel replied. Back home, they arranged flowers for the lobby. Isabella didn't follow patterns. She left space for the light, set one stem too tall in the back so the composition wouldn't feel heavy. The small handwritten card read, Flowers of the day, with the date. Guests lingered longer than usual. Some asked to buy them, but they refused. Not for sale, tomorrow it will be different. The only constant was the sense of enough. The resort shifted in ways that couldn't be filed in reports, but everyone felt it. The receptionist spoke more softly. The chef experimented with toasted bread drizzled with herb oil made from plants grown in the garden. Two new staff members learned to recognize the scent of mint before even seeing the leaves. Victor had a ramp built by the glass house. For the first time, Daniel pushed the wheelchair without having to lift it over a step. Thank you, Isabella said when she stopped at the doorway. Victor simply nodded. It's been a long time since I did something right so quickly. Daniel submitted a short memo, a list of native plants that needed little water, quarterly maintenance costs, a pruning schedule. No fine words, only numbers. Victor read it, signed, and said, Go ahead. No grand speech about vision, yet the next day guests stayed longer on the wooden benches facing the lake. At night, they sat on the wooden deck. The glass house lights kept very low. They didn't name stars or invent stories about the sky. They discussed practical matters, the list of medications for the upcoming month, the date of the next checkup, and who would accompany Daniel's mother to the bank for paperwork. I hate the feeling of having to ask others, Isabella said plainly. Asking is a skill, he replied, and I want to be the first one you ask. She was silent for a moment. All right, then tomorrow call the doctor again about the side effects. My fingertips have felt numb. Okay, tomorrow I'll call. Their intimacy wasn't showy. A hand resting on the other's knee during conversation. A shoulder leaned on a little longer before heading inside. Daniel's shoes always placed facing out so she wouldn't trip when fetching water at night. Small details created the feeling of home without needing words. One evening, Isabella opened her notebook and pointed to a line she had written. Grateful. Today I walked the full northern path without collapsing. Daniel added underneath, Grateful. You let me push the wheelchair for half the way and walk the rest yourself. She closed the notebook. Are we dreaming smaller now? No, he said, just dreaming within our strength. She laughed softly, round and whole. Dreaming within strength, that's its own kind of ambition. and the kind that lasts. By the end of the month, the guest comment book had a few new notes. The garden feels real. This place makes me slow down. The flower arrangements breathe. The chef brought over a plate of hot apple pie, thanking them for the herbs that made the dish stay true to its flavor. Isabella looked at Daniel. Do you realize we haven't done anything grand at all? Sustainability usually looks modest, he answered. She nodded, reaching her hand out. He laced his fingers through hers, the familiar feeling of slightly cool fingertips, the faint pulse at her wrist. Outside, the lake grew darker, but the shoreline was still clear. They sat there a while longer, long enough to feel the wind shift direction, before heading inside when the clock reminded them it was time for her evening medicine. The day ended the way they wanted. No noise, no drama. Just a day completed with a simple breakfast, a few pages read, one pot of soil replaced, and a slow walk around the lake without too many pauses. And for them, that was peace. Winter came earlier than usual. Wind swept endlessly across Lakewood. The maples stripped bare, only a few dry leaves spinning in the air before landing on the water. Inside the glass house, the lights were switched on sooner, warming the space while outside turned to ash. Isabella began to weaken noticeably. Fatigue came more often, sometimes even leaving her breathless after just a few steps. Daniel quietly brought in a new wheelchair he had built, not making a fuss, only placing it in the glass house. In the morning, when her hand rested on the cold armrest, his gaze stayed steady, neither pitying nor overly sorrowful. I think this one looks quite nice, Daniel said lightly, as if commenting on a piece of carpentry. Big wheels, smooth ride. I added leather on the armrests so they won't hurt your hands. Isabella gave a thin smile. I thought you'd have a harder time accepting this. I only have a hard time if you think you must walk everything on your own. Everyone needs support sometimes. And you are mine. That's all. The simple words made Isabella's eyes glisten. She didn't need grand promises, only the certainty in his voice. On rare sunny afternoons, Daniel carried Isabella out onto the wooden porch, placing the chair where she could see the whole lake. He never made the act look like a heavy duty, but rather like a natural habit. His arms were strong, but the way he held her was careful, as though lifting a glass vessel. Sitting there, she listened as he spoke about each plant in the garden. The first white rose you planted last fall has 9 new buds. The lavender's thinning in the cold, but with cover it will hold. And that young maple in the corner? I think by spring it'll be tall enough to cast shade for you. Isabella tilted her head, eyes on the rippling lake. She knew he spoke more than necessary, as if to make up for the silence her illness forced upon her. But she also understood. Each story was his way of holding on to hope, giving every day another shade of color. Don't you ever get tired of talking to me like this? She asked one afternoon. Daniel shook his head. I only feel tired when I can't. Because each time I tell you something, I know today still has something worth mentioning. The answer eased her heart. She leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing slowly, letting her breath fall into rhythm with the wind. One day, fever struck suddenly. Isabella lay exhausted, lips dry, sweat dampening her forehead. Daniel stayed up through the night, changing warm cloths, keeping the room at just the right temperature. When dawn came, his eyes were rimmed red, but his hand remained steady. Victor walked in and froze at the sight. He was used to seeing Daniel in the garden, used to his strength and heavy work, but he had never imagined this patient tenderness. You could call a professional nurse, Victor said hoarsely. This isn't your responsibility. Daniel didn't look up, only wrung out another cloth and wiped Isabella's face. But it is the responsibility of a husband, Victor faltered. In that moment, the layers of a man used to giving orders, measuring everything by profit, cracked open. He saw clearly. This love had nothing to do with contracts, nothing binding it but the choice of the heart itself. You love her more truly than I ever imagined, he whispered, unable to hide his emotion. Only then did Daniel glance at him. His eyes held neither pride nor humility, just the gaze of a man who had chosen the one thing most important in his life. I don't love her because you hope for it, or because of any promise. I love her because she is Isabella, that's all. Victor nodded faintly, saying no more. He turned, closing the door quietly, leaving the room with nothing but her soft breathing and the rhythm of warm cloth against her brow. In the days that followed, when Isabella regained a little strength, Daniel brought her back to the porch. The air was cleaner. The lake was stirred by gentle waves and flocks of birds flew low. "I'll keep the garden alive until you're strong enough to walk out on your own," he said. "If it takes longer, I'll still wait." Isabella looked at him, eyes bright with tears. "I don't know how much time I have, but when you say wait, I don't feel like I have to count the days anymore." Daniel held her hand in his, not gripping tightly, not binding with forever promises. Just warmth, steady and present, enough to let her know she was still here and someone would walk slowly beside her, step by step, day by day. That afternoon, the surface of Lakewood shimmered as if the earth itself was breathing a sigh of relief at such quiet patience. Still following the story? If this video found you outside Soul Stories, we invite you home, where every touching tale begins. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with us. The third spring since their wedding, Lakewood bloomed brighter than ever. Clusters of lavender burst into violet blossoms, their fragrance weaving into the resort's lobby. Isabella's health had grown stronger. Her fatigue was less frequent. She could walk short distances on her own, and sometimes teased Daniel. "Let me try first, don't rush to catch me." He always followed close behind, watching quietly, ready to extend his hand if she needed it. One morning, Isabella sat on the porch with her old watercolor set resting on her lap. Since regaining strength, she had begun painting again, though only small sketches. A patch of flowers, a weathered doorway, Daniel's hands working the soil. That day, her eyes lingered on the lake, brush moving slowly, as if afraid of dropping the moment. By noon, she called Daniel over. "I have a gift for you." The paper was still damp, washed in shades of blue and gray that captured Lakewood in the morning light. At the center, Isabella had painted two small wooden chairs, one holding a man, the other empty, both facing the water. In the bottom corner, in soft handwriting, she had written, "Lakewood, Third Spring." Daniel stared at it for a long time. The painting was clumsy, the strokes uneven, yet he saw in it the lake's rebirth after winter, the scent of fresh grass, the very breath of her in every hue. "Where will you hang it?" Isabella asked. "Somewhere no one can miss it," he answered. That very afternoon, he framed the painting and placed it in the main lobby. Guests stopped to look. When they asked, "Who painted this?" Daniel simply said, "The lady of the house." No one laughed. Each nodded, as though they understood something of the soul of this place. After that painting, Isabella wrote more, not only in her journal, but also in letters. She kept them in a small wooden box, locked on the high shelf. Once, Daniel happened to see her folding one, her face solemn. He didn't ask. One evening, with mist rolling over the lake, Isabella handed him an envelope. "Not to open now. Just keep it, for faith." Daniel held it, ready to refuse, but her gaze was too steady. He nodded, sliding it into the wooden drawer beside their bed. After that, short notes began appearing in her journal. "If one day I'm no longer here, please live fully. Don't abandon the garden. It carries both our souls. Don't close yourself off. Let someone in if they know how to walk slowly with you." Daniel read, his chest tightening. Once he set the journal down and whispered, "I don't need these messages. I just need you." Isabella touched his hand, smiling gently. "And I just need you." But people don't get to choose everything. I don't write to let go. I write to hold on, to keep a piece of strength for you if the day comes when I can't be here. He said nothing, only clasped her hand tighter. For their third anniversary, Daniel arranged no party. Instead, he spread a cloth on the grass near the lake, setting out pastries, red wine, and fresh raspberries. Isabella wore a pale blue dress with a light shawl. They sat watching the lake shimmer with evening light. "I never thought I'd make it to year 3, Isabella said, voice steady but eyes bright. "There were times I thought I had only months." Daniel poured more wine and handed her a glass. "Don't measure in months. Let's count in moments. Today is a moment, and it's ours." She tapped her glass lightly against his. "Then I want to mark this one." Opening her journal, she wrote another line. "Seventh seed, gratitude." That night, as Daniel straightened the painting of Lakewood on the wall, Isabella watched him, her eyes glowing strangely bright. If I'm too tired tomorrow, I'll still have this painting. It's like a second pair of eyes, always looking at the lake, even when I can't. Daniel turned, smiling faintly. And for me, it's a window. Anytime I miss you, I just have to look, and I'll see you sitting there. For a while, neither spoke. No rush of emotion, only the deep understanding that they had endured much, and that each quiet day was its own gift. In the months that followed, Isabella wrote letter after letter. When Daniel tidied the shelves, he noticed the wooden box growing heavier. She didn't hide it, only said, "Don't open them unless I can't tell you myself." He nodded, not arguing. Inside, he prayed silently. May those letters never need to be read. The third anniversary closed with a starry night. They sat on the wooden deck, a wool blanket draped over their shoulders. Isabella leaned against him, eyes lifted to the sky. "Why do you think God gave us more time?" she asked. Daniel breathed deeply, watching the lake glint with starlight. "So we could learn how to live fully." "Not long, but full," Isabella smiled, her smile carrying tears. "Then tomorrow let's plant another seed. The seed of living full." Daniel nodded. He knew that, however uncertain the future, in that very moment, they had done the most important thing, holding each other's hands, letting each day pass into memory complete. The 5th year of their marriage. October at Lakewood was colder than usual, with winds scouring across the lake, scattering deep red maple leaves all along the paths. Inside the resort, life went on as usual, but in the upstairs room, the rhythm had quieted almost to stillness. Isabella was too weak now. She could no longer walk to the porch or hold a paintbrush. The pain, the shortness of breath, kept her lying still, her face pale, though her eyes remained bright. Daniel was always there, sometimes just sitting beside the bed, sometimes adjusting the heater, sometimes gently wiping sweat from her forehead. On their 5th wedding anniversary, he told no one. He simply prepared. Daniel cleared the room of chairs and tables and spread a soft green carpet across the floor. He brought in pots of daisies, lavender, and white roses, the flowers Isabella had always loved, and arranged them around her bed. From the ceiling, he hung hundreds of tiny bulbs, the cords hidden behind curtains. When he switched them on, the room glowed like a starry sky. In the late afternoon, he lifted Isabella upright, propped her against pillows, and drew back the curtains. The room was filled with golden light and the fragrance of flowers. Her eyes widened in wonder. What have you turned this room into?" Daniel took her hand. "The garden by the lake. So today you still have your Lakewood, your flowers, your stars. You don't have to go anywhere." Her gaze moved slowly around the room, then rested on him. Tears fell, but her whisper was clear. "You've given me more than even my dreams." Daniel sat down beside her, holding her against his chest. They stayed silent for a long time. Only the sound of wind from the lake and the mingling scents of flowers filled the room. That night, Isabella drifted to sleep in his arms. Her breaths grew softer, thinner, until at last they slipped away, like a breeze passing through the window frame. Daniel knew the moment had come, but he did not let go. He held her tightly, letting her leave this world as gently as a flower, folding its petals at the end of summer. The funeral was simple, just as she had wished. No elaborate black clothes, only a few close friends, old resort staff, and Victor with reddened eyes. Isabella was buried by the lake, beneath the old maple tree where she had once played as a child. Earth fell over the coffin as lightly as a blanket, while the wind passed by carrying the scent of leaves and lake water. Daniel knelt by the grave, placing a white rose upon it. His hand trembled, but his gaze was calm. Victor stood beside him, searching for words that never came. At last, he simply placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder and gave a quiet squeeze. They exchanged no condolences. They only stood together, watching the lake shimmer under the late autumn sun, as though Isabella were still somewhere close, sitting on a wooden bench, paintbrush in hand. Daniel drew a deep breath. Inside him, an emptiness spread wide, vast as the lake before him. Yet within that emptiness, there was still light, the light of her final smile, her whispered words, "You've given me more than even my dreams." And he knew the dream did not end with the funeral. It would live on in every flower he planted, in each gust of wind across the water, and in his own heart, where Isabella had never truly left. After the funeral, Victor called Daniel into his study. He pushed a folder and a large envelope across the desk. "This is everything I promised, and more. You deserve it." Daniel looked at the envelope, then out the window where the maples swayed in the wind. He shook his head. "I don't need it, sir. You've already helped with my mother's debts and my father's hospital bills. The rest, please keep it." Victor frowned. "Then how do you intend to live?" "With my own hands, and with the memory of Isabella," Daniel replied firmly. "Money cannot repay what I have already been given. All I ask is to keep the land where she rests, so I can be close to her every day." Victor was silent for a long time. When he finally nodded, his eyes glistened, and he didn't bother to hide it. "You're the only one who's ever made me believe love can't be bought. Keep that land. It belongs to you, and it belongs to my daughter." Daniel left the resort on a misty morning. He carried only a few clothes, Isabella's box of letters, and a small wedding photo. He bought an old wooden cottage by the lakeshore, not far from where Isabella was buried. The house was modest, with a leaking roof and moldy walls. Daniel repaired it bit by bit, retiling the roof, replacing windows, building a small porch that faced the water. Around the house, he began planting the flowers Isabella had loved: white daisies, lavender, white roses, and even the wild blooms she once said, "Live stubbornly, like hope." Each year, on their wedding anniversary, Daniel cut a bouquet of white roses, tied with a thin ribbon. He rowed his wooden boat to the middle of the lake, dropping each bloom into the water, letting them drift away. Each time he heard her voice echo, "You gave me more than even my dreams." Time flowed like the surface of the lake. 10 years passed, and Daniel lived a quiet life. He spoke little with others, only helping neighbors now and then to fix a roof or mend a door. Most of his hours were spent in the garden or rereading Isabella's letters. Some were short, only a line: "Eat breakfast, don't skip meals." Some were long, recounting days when she had missed him while he was away. And some broke him open, even as they held him steady. "If one day I am gone, please keep living fully. Don't let memory become your chains." He read them again and again. Each time the feeling was different, sometimes piercing pain, sometimes comfort, but never once did he feel truly alone, because every word still carried her breath. When Lakewood entered its 10th year since Isabella's passing, another sorrow arrived. Victor died peacefully in his sleep. He left behind a vast estate, dividing it between charities and local development funds. In his will, Daniel's name appeared too, entitled to a significant share, recognized as family. But Daniel attended the reading only to say, "Thank him, but I ask only to keep the land by the lake, where Isabella rests. The rest, let it go to those who need it more." The lawyer was startled but didn't argue. Those present fell silent. They understood Daniel wasn't refusing out of pride, but because for him, the true inheritance already lay beneath the maple tree. That afternoon, Daniel visited Isabella's grave. The maple had grown wide, shading the whole plot. He sat down, placing his hand on the simple stone engraved, "Isabella Hartman, loved and beloved." "I'm still here," he whispered. 10 years now. People say time heals all wounds, but I don't think so. It only teaches you how to live with them, how to weave them into life. The way the lake still holds morning mist, even after the sun rises. The wind stirred, and a maple leaf drifted onto his shoulder. Daniel picked it up, slipping it into the final page of her old journal. He felt as though another thread had just been tied, binding present to past. A decade of emptiness, but not entirely empty. Daniel knew he had lived each day sustained by memory and by a love that refused to fade. He didn't try to fill the void, only kept it as one keeps a deep lake, still, but reflecting everything. At night, from the porch of his small home, he watched the moon shimmer over the lake. On the wooden table lay Isabella's stack of letters, still waiting. He opened one at random, read slowly, then closed it, leaning back in his chair. For a fleeting moment, he saw her smiling in the chair beside him, paintbrush in hand, eyes bright. And he knew someday the wind would carry him toward a new beginning. But until then, Isabella's love remained the light strong enough to keep his heart warm. One early autumn morning, the town of Lakewood welcomed a new face. Claire, a young teacher who had come to work at the small elementary school on the hillside. She had soft brown hair, a neat figure, and a smile that always seemed to leave a space of warmth for whoever she met. Daniel met Claire for the first time at the weekend market. He was choosing a few small flower pots for his garden when he heard her voice beside him. "These are daisies, aren't they? My students just learned about them in class. I'd like to bring one back so they can see it up close." Daniel turned, meeting a pair of clear, unguarded eyes. He nodded. "Daisies. They're tough flowers, perfect for children to care for." Claire smiled, bending down to choose a pot. "Do you garden too?" "I keep a lot of flowers at home," Daniel answered briefly, not intending to say more. But when he saw her struggling a little with the pot, he offered a hand, and together they walked past the stalls. Their next meetings came naturally, in the town's little bookstore, on the sloping road down to the lake, sometimes on the school porch where children waved eagerly to her. Claire never tried to force her way into Daniel's life. She only asked light questions, just enough to open a small door. Once she stopped by his wooden cottage by the lake, bringing apple pie her students had given her. Looking around, she saw rows of white daisies, stretches of purple lavender, and a corner full of white roses. She didn't ask why. She only whispered, "Beautiful. This place must hold many memories." Daniel poured tea, setting a cup before her, then sat across from her. For the first time in years, he spoke willingly. He told her about Isabella, about mornings by the lake, about the glass house lit with lanterns, about the last day when he turned their room into a garden. His voice was slow, each word falling like a pebble into water. Claire listened in silence. No impatience, no comparisons, no interruptions. When he finished, when it seemed the story had reached its end, she only said, "Thank you for telling me. People only share what's most precious when they trust." Daniel looked up, catching her eyes. There was no pity there, no jealousy, only presence, steady and gentle. One afternoon, they walked around the lake together. Maple leaves fell across the path, the breeze carrying the scent of water. Daniel stopped, speaking almost to himself. "It's been 10 years. I still can't stop remembering. I always thought that opening my heart again would be a betrayal." Claire walked slowly, brushing her fingers against a dry branch. "Love isn't a box with limits," she said. "You can love again and still keep your first love whole. It's like how teachers love each class. No class replaces another. The love just expands." Daniel stayed quiet. Her words didn't erase the past, didn't ask him to forget. Instead, they allowed memory to remain intact while making room for something new. "You don't have to choose," Claire continued. "Isabella will always be part of you. But that doesn't mean you can't keep living." In his chest, Daniel felt a small door shift open, not noisily, but slowly, like ice beginning to crack on the lake when spring comes. The following month, Claire sometimes dropped by to help Daniel teach neighborhood children about flowers. She told them stories while he added little details about care. The children laughed, running around the garden, leaving muddy footprints on the wooden porch. Daniel, once unused to noise, didn't mind it this time. One evening after the children had gone, only the two of them remained. Claire sat on the porch steps, holding a cup of hot tea. "You know," she said softly, "I think Isabella would want you to have days like this. Not as a replacement, but as a continuation." Daniel gazed at Lakewood, rippling under the wind. For the first time in many years, the water didn't feel so empty. Instead, it seemed like a wide mirror, holding the image of the past while also reflecting the new. That night, Daniel opened Isabella's box of letters. In one, the familiar handwriting read, "If one day I'm no longer here, please live fully. Don't close your heart. Let someone step in, if they know how to walk slowly with you." He sat by the lamp for a long time, reading it over and over. The words felt written for this very moment, as if Isabella had foreseen it. His tears fell, but they were tears of release. Daniel whispered, unsure to whom, "I'll keep you with me, and I'll learn to open my heart, because that too was your wish. That autumn, the winds over Lakewood changed. They no longer cut sharply like knives, but softened, carrying the scent of late-season daisies. Daniel still dropped white roses into the lake on the anniversary, still lit candles at Isabella's grave. But when he came home, there was now a woolen scarf Claire had forgotten on the chair. His heart, after a decade of solitude, had begun to learn how to beat in rhythm with another breath. Not hurriedly, not to erase, but to open like Lakewood itself, always ready to welcome a new breeze. Spring returned to Lakewood in full bloom. The old maple by Isabella's grave shed clusters of tender blossoms, and the breeze off the lake carried the scent of fresh grass. That morning, a small wedding took place on the wooden porch by the water, simple yet filled with warmth. There was no blaring music, no hundreds of guests, only familiar faces from town, a few of Claire's colleagues, neighborhood children running about, and the shimmering water as if blessing them. Daniel wore a light gray suit. On his lapel, instead of the traditional boutonniere, he pinned a single white rose. Many noticed, but no one asked. They knew it was a silent tribute to the woman who had once walked with him through a part of his life. Isabella was present in every petal of that rose. Quiet, gentle. Claire arrived in a simple dress, her brown hair tied neatly. When their eyes met, there was no commotion, only certainty. She took his hand, warm, like a new breeze sweeping across the lake. In the brief vows before the pastor, Daniel made no grand promises. He only said, "I have known loss. Today I want to learn to cherish once more. With you, Claire, I promise to walk slowly so I won't miss a single moment." Claire smiled, her eyes moist. "With you, I promise always to listen and to remind you that love has no limits." They exchanged thin silver rings, then walked hand in hand beneath the arch of daisies Daniel had planted during winter. Children cheered, guests clapped. On Daniel's lapel, the white rose quivered in the breeze as though smiling too. In the years that followed, the wooden house by the lake was no longer silent. Children's laughter mingled with the waves and the scent of flowers. Anna, their firstborn daughter, had bright eyes and loved to sit for hours by the flower beds, asking endlessly, "Daddy, what's this plant called? When will it bloom? Can I water it more?" In her curiosity and wonder for the green world, Daniel often caught glimpses of Isabella, with her innocent and sincere love for small things that grew. Lucas, their second child, was entirely different. He loved the lake. Every day he ran to the shore, tossing pebbles and shouting whenever fish darted past. Daniel built him a little wooden boat, like the paper ones he had once folded for Isabella. This time it was his son who rowed it, laughter carrying far across the water. Claire remained as gentle as when they first met. She gardened with Anna, dried books in the sun, and sometimes only listened quietly while Daniel shared old stories. Never once was she jealous of the name Isabella. On the contrary, whenever Daniel went silent before a white rose, she placed her hand over his and said, "She's still here, and because of her, you are the man I love today." One moonlit night, Lakewood lay still as a mirror. Daniel sat alone on the wooden deck. Claire was asleep, Anna and Lucas breathing softly in their room. On the table beside him rested a bouquet of white roses, a few petals falling, the breeze carrying them gently onto the water. He lifted his face to the moon and whispered, "Isabella, the love you gave me never faded. It only blossomed into other flowers. I've kept your words, to live fully, to open my heart, not to close myself off. And today, I have a family, the sound of children's laughter. But in every moment, I still hear you, like the scent of flowers, like the wind across the lake." Tears slipped down his cheeks, but they were tears of peace. He, Claire, and the children released the bouquet into the water, watching each bloom drift away. The moonlight caught them, turning them into small glowing stars. Daniel's new happiness did not erase his old love. It continued it. Isabella was still present, in the white rose on his lapel, in Anna's bright gaze, in the sound of the waves that Lucas adored. Claire did not replace her. She built with him, so that the old love could rest in peace while the new love flourished. After 10 years of waiting, Daniel's heart had finally healed. not by forgetting, but by holding on and opening up. Beneath the old maple tree where Isabella lay, flowers still bloomed with the seasons. And by the lake, in the wooden house, children's laughter rang out. Husband and wife whispered softly to each other, and flowers kept blossoming. Proof that true love never dies. It only changes form, blooming into new petals in the wider garden of life.